What's up, you guys? Hope you're doing well and enjoying your first week of the remote learning. Woo. So for the stuff that we're going to be doing, it's going to be continuing in our book because we got to get to the end of the book by the end of the year. And we're pretty close. I mean, right now we're going to be starting at number 126. That's on page 25. And we're pretty close to the end, and I'm still going to skip over a few of them just because I want to make sure that we get to it, and I'm only kind of meeting with you guys once a week, so we're going to have to make the best with the time we got. Okay, so like I said, on page 25 in your book with number 126, it says Essential Elements Quiz. The reason that we're doing this one is because it's got a couple of concepts that we were talking about before we left, and I just want to kind of go over real briefly before we start again. So it was talking about 16th notes, and the first one is obviously just 4 16th notes, 1 E and a. The second rhythm is when we have an 8th note followed by 2 16ths, 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a, 1. Okay. The third one is where we swapped what we have here by having the 8th note followed by 2 16ths. We put the 2 16ths followed by the 8th note. So we have 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. Okay? And then the last one we did it right before we left, like not too long before we were out, so you may not remember it. But it's when we have a dotted quarter note followed by 2 16ths. Okay, so we hold the dotted quarter note, what we would normally do, and instead of just having, like I said, 95% of the time, when we have a dotted quarter note, we have a single 8th note right after it. In this case, we're putting the dotted quarter note, and then instead of an 8th note, we're just putting 2 16ths in its place. So we have 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4, so on and so forth. Okay? So to incorporate all of those different kind of 16th note rhythms, we're doing that at number 126. It's not too challenging. Key signature wise, range wise, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of play through it. We're not going to be able to do the repetition like we would do in class, but you at least get to hear what it's supposed to sound like so you can practice it on your own. Okay, we do have 1 8th note at the very beginning as a pickup, so that means that you would get 1 and 2 from me. We would come in on the and of 2. Okay, here we go. And 1 and 2. Pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy with that one. There is a bit of 16th notes that are thrown in there. But again, we should be pros at that by now. For percussion, on your practice pad, I'm going to angle it down so you guys can see the practice pad. Okay. For percussion, it's mostly working on flams with a few 16ths thrown in there and then noticing where the accents are. We also have a few 5-stroke rules. Okay. Here we have percussion and 1 and 2. Okay, simple as that. Very, very straightforward. All right, make sure that those 5-stroke rolls are nice and clean. The second thing that we're going to do today, we're going to skip over 127, and it's cut time, so I'm sure you're going to be happy we're skipping over that. Okay, and we're going to go to number 128. Now, where's my eraser? It's hiding from me. I don't know where it is. I'll just use my fist for now. And 128 is something that we've talked about briefly. I can't quite remember if we've actually had something like this in our music before, but it's like taking a concept that you guys already are pretty familiar with. So we have DC Alfine, which is what we've done plenty of times. And remember that the DC, the C component of it, means we go back to the top of the piece. Now, the one that we're being introduced to now is a DS Alfine. The difference is the letter S, obviously. And for this, the S, it can stand for sign. Okay, it says segno, but it's pretty basically sign. So DC Alfine we know really well. DS Alfine is the one we're being introduced to, and this is what the sign looks like. It looks like an S with a slash through it, and then a 2 dots on either side. So I usually say like an S with a division symbol through the middle of it. And instead of going all the way back to the beginning of the piece, how we would if it was DC Alfine, we go back to the sign. So if you look at your music for 128, you start at the very beginning, you play all the way through, and then it says DS Alfine at the end. Now, if you notice where the sign is, I believe it's at measure 17, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sorry, measure 13. You'll see where that little S is with the sign. That's where we would go back to. So we get to the very end of the piece, and then we come back to the sign, not all the way to the beginning, but come back to the sign, and then play from the sign all the way to the end to where it says fine, and then we finish. Okay? It's the same concept as DC, but instead of going back to the very beginning, how we would for C, we go back to the sign for S. Okay? And let me my trumpet. All right. This one does have a little bit more range, but it's mostly just working on the concept of the DS Alfine. Also, just be aware that we do have some accidentals thrown in there, especially around measure 10. Okay? And, yeah, let's hear it. Still 2/4, still same key signature that we had for the last one. Here we go. Okay? So instead of going all the way back to the beginning, I went back to the sign. Okay? For percussion, you guys, this is primarily working on your 5-stroke and 9-stroke rolls. Again, something that you should be very, very familiar with. But yeah, let's go through it for you guys once, okay? Here we go. For percussion, very beginning of 128. Make sure to take the roll at the very end of the DS Alfine. That leads directly into that first note at measure 13 where the sign is, okay? Here we go. Here we go. 6, 7, and 1, 9, 1, 2, and 5, 5, 1, 2, and 5. Forte. Take the sign. 5, 5. Ah, crap. That was my bad. Almost got it. Made that little mistake there at the end. Okay. That's still the general concept of it, okay? For right now, just focus in on those two guys. We are going to, again, get a little bit further in the book, and we are going to skip over some stuff just because we're trying to make up for lost time. But for right now, just focus on those two because I know you guys got a lot of other stuff on your plate. Okay? All right, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to help you, and I'll see you soon. Love you, mean it.